So now I'll be saying a short summary for the short story I Stand Here Ironing. So it started off with an unnamed narrator who was Emily's mother, and she was standing beside an ironing table as she was ironing some clothes. She was calling on the phone a person who was unknown, but maybe a social worker or something. It was mentioning that mentioning Emily that she might need some help, and this social worker is saying that she can provide this help for Emily. But then the mother responded to her that Emily doesn't need any help because the mother herself knows that she can do nothing more to help Emily. So the mother herself, she sees that Emily doesn't need any kind of help, and the mother herself, doesn't see that Emily is lacking something, or she is missing something in her character and anything like that. It's totally the opposite. The mother sees Emily as a perfect person, and she will be a complete and a good person as she is right now. So then, talking about the past of the mother, she had Emily when she was only 19 years old, and she couldn't actually support her either financially or mentally, and that's because the father of Emily, or the husband of this mother, left her when she got pregnant and had Emily. So her financial support wasn't enough towards Emily, as she also used to leave her in daycares, and she used to leave her to her neighbors so that she can do any kind of stuff. She would go buy some groceries, and she would leave Emily to her neighbors. So she couldn't help Emily and care about Emily that much. This is due to the lack of support she could give her. And this is totally out of her hands. I blame this to the society. This is blamed towards the society, because this society then here appears the theme of the gender role, as the society here shows that only men can gain money and support the families, but if a single mother wanted to help her child, she couldn't do that. She had to remarry someone else so that he can spend money on his family, or maybe she would leave her child to daycares and anywhere, like what Emily's mom did. So as I mentioned before, Emily's mom had to remarry someone else so that he can give her the support that Emily wanted to have or lacked. So when she married that other person, Emily then was trying to adjust to this new stepfather, but also the mother then got pregnant with another child, who then called Susan. So basically Emily had a sister. Emily at that time wasn't really happy with this kind of thing, because or having another sister, because her mom herself couldn't help Emily herself or support Emily financially, as I also mentioned before. So having another sister would be something like a burden to the family. So then when the mother gave birth to Susan, Emily's sister, she then found that Emily was getting sick, and she was getting really thin, and claiming that she had nightmares and a lot of stuff. As she was also sick with a disease called Melissa's. So that disease made her really thin and couldn't eat anything, and claiming that she was having nightmares, and saying that to her mom so that she can get some attention from her mother. But during that time, when she tried to go to a doctor, some kind of a doctor or a clinic or a hospital, they convinced the mother to let Emily live in a convalescent home so that she can, as it was claimed, she can have sometimes to Emily to like regain her health, like eat again, trying to eat again, and giving her the care that her mom couldn't give her. And also, they thought that this could be a good chance for Emily's mom to have some time to raise the other child that she gave birth to, who is Susan. So Emily at that time felt like she was her mom didn't care about her at all, and she only cared about Susan. So when Emily went to this convalescent home, she couldn't see at all her family or her mother, as they could only like see her only twice a month. So and also when they tried to like see her, they would meet from a far distance, as they have an invisible wall between them. And that's because they wanted to prevent like physical contact between the children and the parents, as it was claimed that they tried to prevent physical germs or physical touch between both the parents and the children. So also when in this convalescent home, Emily tried to make some friends, and she found a friend that was always with her, hand in hand. But then when it was noticed that Emily was always spending time and trying to have a friend, they sent her friend away into another place. And Emily at this time claimed that at this place they don't really like you to love anyone here. This quote was said by Emily. So after a while, the social worker in this convalescent home agreed to send Emily back home. So Emily at that time was trying to like know what was going on and catch up on things that were missing her, because she stayed in this convalescent home for like 8 months. During that time, Emily was really treating everyone and her family and her mother really in a really cold way, because she was really brokenhearted at that time. Also, when she went back home, she then went to school again, but she had a disease that really prevented her from like going to school that much. So she was labeled as a slow learner, and also she couldn't like make any friends, and because of the way she was treating people or people treating her, because she still looked that skeleton thin, as it was mentioned in the short story. And as I also mentioned, that she was always absent and couldn't attend any school classes because of her disease. So Emily had this disease that was called tuberculosis, that prevented her, as I mentioned before, from going to school. So then Emily also, as it was mentioned, labeled that she was a slow learner. As well, Emily's physical development as a teenager was really slow. So she had like self-esteem problems, and she wasn't confident at all in herself. Unlike Susan, her sister, who was younger than her, with 5 years younger than her. However, Susan didn't really like to talk with Emily, or be treating Emily sometimes in a really bad way. They only played together in the really rare moments, but otherwise they were always like fighting. They were always not getting along with each other. Also, Susan also always took Emily's jokes and told her that as if like she's the one who created or invented these jokes, as Emily always wanted to be a comedian and had a really good sense of humor. And this thing or this sense of humor, what really pushed Emily through her life and gave her that sense of living. Eventually, Emily's mom tried to like share Emily's passion and always wanted her to always try to encourage her to like join and be in group with the school talent show and being there as a comedian or doing stand-up comedy as it's known nowadays. And also when she actually took part in the school talent show once, she won and she started being a talented performer and doing a lot of jokes and being actually a comedian. So then the narrator or the mother, Emily's mom, assumed that Emily will just be fine as she is right now. So eventually the narrator mentioned that Emily also had a really harsh childhood and a rocky childhood, as it was claimed or mentioned also in the short play or the short story. And she hopes that Emily views herself as a really valuable person who is really important towards her. So this was the summary of the short play, and now starting with the character analysis. So now I'm mentioning the first character, which is the narrator. She was basically a named character who was 14 years old and failed to explain the aspect of her daughter Emily's life that made Emily who she is now or during in this play. And then when she was narrating this play or this story, she was a single young mother who had Emily at a very young age. To be specific, she was 19 years old. And she, this part, this happened in the play, in the short story during the time of the play. After her husband abandoned her, she struggled to like raise and work alone to help Emily. So then she eventually remarried someone else, and as I was mentioning before, she had to do this to support Emily and her other children that she had after Emily. She remarried that person to support them financially and giving them the help that she couldn't really give Emily. Then she had like eventually in the play she had this feeling of guilt that was taking over her during due to the treatment that the treatment of her to Emily that lacked any support or help or that feeling of being loved, as treating her the same as her other siblings that she had after having Emily. So that was the narrator, who was the mother of Emily. Secondly, I'm going to talk about Emily, who was a 19 years old daughter to the narrator. Emily, according to someone else who was talking to the mother on the phone while she was ironing some clothes, as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, Emily needed some help because she was seen as she wasn't cared about enough. and she was always so sickly and growing as a sickly person who always had diseases and was really thin because of these diseases. Um, and also, as I mentioned before, this illness didn't let her go to school quite properly. Um, and she would like try to categorize herself according to displaying the theme of beauty and grace, because in the it was mentioned in the play that Emily tried as much as she can to look beautiful and try to like uh, treat herself in a different way, or she was like trying to take care of herself and her looks because she wasn't growing properly, or her growth as a teenager was really really slow. So that's what led her and made her take care of her physical appearance more and more. Also, Emily loved being a comedian and had that good sense of humor. So she tried to develop throughout the play, or this part of the play, that she was trying to like go to talent shows to the school and trying to develop herself to be a talented comedian. And this would really try to like give her life this sense or the meaning, um, like this of her being a comedian. Also, she had like low self-esteem due to her looks, or how she appeared as a teenager, as I said. And also because she had dark hair, unlike her sister Susan, who had this blonde and curly hair. Emily was totally the opposite. She looked quite differently from her sister Susan. That's why she sometimes wished that she would look like her sister, as she views her as beautiful and self-confident about herself, unlike Emily, who was actually her elder sister. So this is the character analysis of Emily, and now I'm going to talk about Susan. So Susan was a 14-year-old daughter who was Emily's sibling. And her physical description was she was a bit chubby. She was like curly haired. Her hair was blonde. And she was self-confident about herself, unlike her sister Emily. But Susan was always sloppy and shallow, and she was less thoughtful than Emily. She always wanted to be like Emily for some stuff, this sense of humor that Susan didn't have. She was trying to copy Emily and have it as well. So, and this appeared within the story, that she was trying to steal some of Emily's comics, or Emily's codes for this comedy. She tried to steal them and mention that she is the one who wrote these comics for herself. Although Emily tried to mention that this was stolen from her, but the family didn't really care about this, and they thought that they were playing with each other, or maybe, or something similar to that. Susan, she grown to hate Emily actually over the years, because she was being everything Susan is not. As she thought and saw that Emily is much smarter and funnier than Susan. So that's what led Susan to hating her sister, her elder sister. So now I'm going to start comparing between the characters. So I'm going to be comparing between the mother's treatment to Emily and her treatment also, but with Susan. So starting off with this, I'm going to be talking about her treatment with Emily first. The mother tried to treat Emily well and tried what she can to always be right there for Emily and support her, even though she couldn't do that in the first place because she had Emily at a really young age. And during this period, her husband left her, or her boyfriend, so she couldn't help Emily or try to support her, especially financially, because of this lack of finances that the society put pressure on, because she had to have a man in her life to support her or give her this money or spend money on her, as she couldn't do it on herself, on her own. So Emily, the mother, didn't have enough time to be there with Emily, as she always put her in health cares or this convalescent home, for example. She tried to give Emily this care, but from outside of the family, not from the inside. She always put a third person or third party, such as these places, the health places or the convalescent homes, to give the care and the treatment that Emily's mom couldn't give Emily herself. So Emily grew up being really sick person who was didn't look very well. She was really thin, and she always had diseases. She couldn't eat well, eating disorders, and many more stuff. Unlike Susan, also Emily grew up treating her parents and treating everyone else in a really cold way, and that's because what she saw from her mother, because she didn't really expect her mother to leave her to be raised in some kind of orphanage or some kind of healthcare homes, and not help her to be raised in her own family. She didn't expect this at all from her mother. Unlike Susan was always with her mother. She was raised in her home. She had a father who was Emily's stepdad, and she was really healthy and looked very well, unlike her elder sister. But she was really shallow and sloppy, and she couldn't be that kind person, unlike Emily. And what has Emily been through made her the person she is right now. This, what I said, highlights the fact that the mother's treatment to Emily and to Susan are completely different. And this also highlights the fact that the mother may be a bit mistaken that she had another daughter, even though she couldn't support her elder daughter. So This was something that we can blame the mother on, and at the same time also is like putting Emily into these health cares. This wasn't really fair for Emily, that she was being raised from outside, and Susan was being raised with her family and her parents around her. Also, when Emily turned 19 years old, she was like a second mother to her siblings, as she was always helping her mother with home stuff, and she didn't even attend school. That was also a difference point between Emily and Susan, as Emily was sitting at home trying to do the mother stuff, as it was mentioned, and being a second mom. Unlike Susan, she attended school and completed her education quite well, while Emily did not. So this is the comparison between the mother's treatment towards Emily and towards Susan. Also, adding a small point is that Emily, as it was mentioned, or as I mentioned before, that Emily, when she started being a comedian, her mother eventually supported her and tried to make her a professional or a well-known comedian. But even though before this kind of support, the mother didn't really care about her passion, or she was actually surprised that Emily had such passion towards comedy. Um, Also, it was mentioned that Susan tried to steal some of Emily's jokes, and when Emily tried to mention that Susan did so, the mother didn't really care and thought that Emily is blaming Susan for something she really didn't. But actually, Susan really did so. But no one, unfortunately, believed Emily that Susan was stealing her jokes and claiming it was hers. So this is also one of the main points between the comparison of the mother's treatment to Emily and the mother's treatment to Susan. Now I'm going to be talking about the short story, which is called The Legacy, and giving also a small summary about it, and also analyzing its characters. So now I'm going to be summarizing and explaining the themes that appeared in the short story, which is called The Legacy. Many themes have appeared in this short story, as the theme of ego, envy, freedom, identity, gender roles, quality, knowledge, and improvement in The Legacy that was written by Virginia Woolf. The story is told by an anonymous narrator from her complete shorter fiction series, and after reading the story, the reader understands that Woolf may be exploring the themes of ego. Gilbert tends to be more focused on himself in the story than he is on anyone, something that is indeviant when reading Angela's diaries. He stops to focus on his own memories of what might have happened as he comes across events in the diaries in which he is listed. And he has the ability to recall how he felt at that time and what he was doing. It is also clear, though, that he never remembers how anyone else have felt or what they have might been doing at that time. This can be important, as it means that the most important person in the life of Gilbert, or the person whom he is most concentrated about, is only himself. It is further discussed how self-centered Gilbert can be, as Gilbert believes that Sissy's offer of assistance, if he wants it, of course, is motivated by being enamored with him. Again, this would suggest that Gilbert lacks the ability to remove a circumstance from his own pride or ego. When Gilbert looks at himself in the mirror after Sissy left the house, something that becomes clearer to the reader, and we learn that he sees himself as a very distinguished looking man, which it might also be significant that when Gilbert reads Angela's diaries, as soon as his name no longer appears, Woolf tells that the reader that Gilbert's interest slackened. This will again mean that Gilbert could be self-centered with very little interest in others, and to the reader it also becomes clear that Gilbert is jealous of BM, as it becomes clearer as the story progresses that Gilbert feels threatened by him as he was with Angela. So now I'll be analyzing the characters of the short story which is called The Legacy.
What if
Starting
William
off with
Shakespeare
Gilbert
had a sister
Clarendon,
who
who
matched
was a
his
politician who
imagination,
aged
his
50
wit,
years old
and his way
had
with
a
words?
distinguished look.
Would she have gone to school
He
and set
has
the stage alight?
overinflated ego
In her
and
essay,
always
A
sees
Room of
himself
One's
as
Own,
self-centered
Virginia
and
Woolf
seek
argues
attention.
that this would have been
He was
impossible.
always interested in
She
reading about
concocts a
himself
fictional
and
sister
skips
who's
the
stuck
part
at home,
that he was
snatching
not
time
mentioned
to
in.
scribble a few
While
pages
he was
before she
reading
finds
his dead
herself
wife's
betrothed
diary,
and runs
his
away.
mind wandered
While her brother finds
to
fame
his
and
future,
fortune,
only
she remains
memorizing
abandoned and
what
anonymous.
he said and done towards Angela.
In this thought experiment,
He could not
Woolf
remember what
demonstrates
the
the
house
tragedy
looked
of
like the
genius
night that
restricted
Angela
and looks
had
back through
BM
time for
over
hints
dinner.
of these hidden
Whether
histories.
she then waited
She wrote,
up for
when one
him
reads of a
if the
witch
chairs
being
had
dumped,
been drawn
of a
close
woman
together.
possessed by devils,
He also
of
thought
a
that
wise woman
Sissy
selling
was
herbs,
secretly in
or
love
even
with
a
him,
very
and
remarkable
he was not
man who had a
realizing
mother, then I
what
think
was
we're
going
on the
around him
track
for
of a
years.
lost novelist,
He also does
a
not
suppressed
regret the
poet,
fact that
of
he
some
did not
mute and
have
inglorious
children,
Jane
as he
Austen.
believed that
A
life
Room of
has been
One's
already
Own
busy
considers
by
a
his
world
job
denied
and
great
hopes
works
to
of
become
art
an
due to
important
exclusion and
politician or
inequality.
maybe even a prime minister later.
How best can we understand
However,
the internal
he
experience
always
of alienation?
infantilises
In
his
both her
wife
essays
and
and
believes
fiction,
that her life
Virginia
is
Woolf
made
shapes
up
the
of
slippery
trifles
nature
and
of
it's not
subjective
important.
experience into words.
He also views her
characters
as
frequently
naive,
lead inner
childish,
lives that are deeply
ignorant,
at
and
odds with their external
feeble-minded,
existence.
and criticizes her
To help make
handwriting
sense of
by
these
saying it is
disparities,
a
the
school,
next time you read Woolf,
schoolgirl
here are some
handwriting.
aspects of her life
Gilbert
and work
was
to consider.
very controlling on his
She was
wife
born
as well,
Adeline Virginia Stephen
as he
in
always wanted to
1882
see
to a large and
what
wealthy
she was
family,
writing in
which
her
enabled her to
diaries
pursue a
and
life
would
in the
ask for
arts.
she would
The
ask
death of
for
her
his
mother in
permission to
1895
volunteer
was
in the
followed by
East
that of
End.
her
He was
half-sister,
the ultimate
father,
snob,
and brother
as
within the next 10 years.
he always
These
tells
losses
Sissy
led to Woolf's
he
first
hopes
depressive
she
episode
has
and
other
subsequent
clothes
institutionalization.
upon which a pearl brooch
As a young
would
woman,
not
she
look
purchased a house
quite
in the
so
Bloomsbury
encouraging.
area of London
This
with her
this
siblings.
part was
This
claimed
brought her
by
into contact
Gilbert,
with a circle of
Angela's
creatives,
husband.
including E.M.
He
Forrester,
also claimed
Clive
that there
Bell,
were
Roger
thousands
Fry,
of
and Leonard Woolf. These friends
Sissy
became
Millers,
known as the Bloomsbury Group,
drab
and
little
Virginia and
women
Leonard
in
married in
black
1912.
carrying attaché
The members of
cases.
this group were
He
prominent
used
figures
to
in
call
modernism,
BM
a cultural movement
a
that sought to
spiceman,
push the boundaries of
formulate
how
society
reality is
opinion of
represented.
him without even
Key
knowing
features
him,
of
and he
modernist
hated the
writing
clothes
include the
Angela
use of
wore
stream of
to
consciousness,
the white
interior
top.
monologue,
He secretly
distortions in
notes
time,
that
and
BM,
multiple or
it
shifting
seemed,
perspectives.
wasn't used
These
to
appear in the work of Ezra Pound,
poor
Gertrude
maids,
Stein, James
and
Joyce, and
concludes
Woolf
BM
herself.
had
While
never
reading
done
Joyce's
an honest
Ulysses,
day's work
Woolf
in
began
his life.
writing Mrs. Dalloway.
Also, when he called
Like
Sissy,
Ulysses,
he
the
noted
text
the
takes
cheap
place over
clock
the course of a
ticking on
single
the
day and opens
mantelpiece,
under
which
seemingly
means that
mundane
no matter what
circumstances.
happens, he will
Mrs.
never
Dalloway
change.
said she would buy the
The
flowers
story
herself.
also ends with his epiphany,
But the novel dives deeply into
but
the
it
character's
is not
traumatic
sure
past,
whether
weaving
Gilbert
the
will
inner
change
world
his
of numbed
character after
socialite
reading the
Clarissa
diary of the
Dalloway
dead
with
wife
that of
or
the
not.
shell-shocked veteran,
Now
Septimus
I will
Warren
be
Smith.
analyzing the character Angela Clarendon.
Woolf uses interior monologue
Angela
to contrast
always
the
thinks
rich
of
world of the
everyone and
mind
everything.
against her character's
She
external
left her
existences.
affairs in order
In her novel
before
To the
committing
Lighthouse,
suicide,
mundane
marking
moments like a
what
dinner
she
party
wanted
or
people
losing
to
a
have.
necklace trigger
She was
psychological
also a genius
revelations
for
in the lives of the
sympathy,
Ramsays,
as it was
a
mentioned in the
fictionalized
short
version
story.
of Woolf's family growing
She
up.
loved the beautiful things that came with status
To the
and
Lighthouse
living in
also
luxury.
contains one of the
She
most
had
famous
rings,
examples of Woolf's
necklaces,
radical
brooches.
representation of time.
She had a passion for
In the
little
Time Passes
boxes,
section,
and this could
10
imply
years are
that she
distilled
was a
into
person
about
who
20
always
pages.
kept secrets.
Here, the lack of
She
human
enjoyed
presence
the
in the
fact
Ramsays
that
beach
she
house
is having
allows
a
Woolf to
distinguished
reimagine
husband
time
as she
in
adored
flashes and
Gilbert
fragments
at
of
first.
prose. The
However,
house was left.
he saw her
The house
as
was
a
deserted.
naive person,
It was left like a shell
and
on a
she,
sandhill
although
to
she
fill
was
with dry salt
innocent,
grains
shy,
now that life had left it.
docile, submissive, and
In her
blushes to
novel The
ask her
Waves, there
husband's
is little
permission to
distinction
volunteer
between the
to help
narratives
others.
of the 6 main characters.
She is trapped in an
Woolf experiments
upper-class
with collective
milieu that
consciousness,
hides the real
at times
world from
collapsing
her.
the 6
She
voices
despises
into one.
herself
It is not one
from
life that
living
I
in
look back
such
upon.
luxury when
I'm
she
not one
hears from
person.
how
I
BM's
am many
mother
people.
worked
I
as
do
a
not
chairwoman.
altogether know who I
She
am.
changed as a
Ginny,
character
Susan,
and becomes
Neville, Rhoda, or
resolute
Louis,
and
or how to
mistress of her
distinguish
own
my
fate
life from
and
theirs.
draws away from Gilbert's education.
In The Waves,
And she
6
learns
become one.
more
But in the
about the world
gender-bending
that
Orlando,
from
a
BM,
single character
as she
inhabits
changed from
multiple
being
identities.
a devoted wife
The
to assume
protagonist is a
adulteress.
poet who switches between
Finally,
genders
her
and lives
suicide,
for
according to
300
her,
years.
is a fact of
With its fluid
bravery
language and
and
approach to
resolve.
identity,
And
Orlando
the
is
third
considered
character
a
that I'm
key
going
text
to
in gender
analyze
studies.
is Sissy Miller. She was
The
Angela's
mind can
devoted
only fly
secretary
so
for
far
many
from the
years,
body
as
before it
Angela
returns to the
had been
constraints of life.
more than
Like many of her
employer, according
characters,
to her.
Wolf's life ended in tragedy when she
Sissy
drowned
had a
herself at the
special
age of 59.
relationship with Angela,
Yet
as
she
she left
expressed hope
Sissy a
beyond suffering.
brooch
Through deep
with
thought, Wolf's
inscription
characters
written
are
on
shown
it,
to
which
temporarily
said,
transcend
"For
their
Sissy
material
Miller
reality.
with my love."
And in its
Also,
careful
Angela
consideration
claimed
of the
that
complexity of the mind,
that
her
Sissy
work
is
charts
a
the importance
soul
of making
of
our inner lives known
discretion
to
and
each
so
other.
silent and
Not
so
afraid of Virginia
trustworthy.
Woolf? Then check our
And
book
she
recs
could tell
list
her
to see which of her
anything.
masterpieces
She was
our
in
team
tears
recommends.
over Angela's
And thanks
death
to our partners
when
at Audible, you can download
also
a
she
free
was the
audio
sister
version
to
of any of her
BM.
books on
And now with the fourth
audible.com/TEDEd.
character that I'm going to analyze today is BM. BM was Sissy's brother and Angela's lover as well. He was a working class radical, a socialist and a revolutionary. He hated the upper class people, but he was open-minded enough to fall in love with someone belonging to the upper class, who was Angela. He opens Angela's eyes to the world, to plight of the working class people. His mother was a chairwoman when he told the story of his childhood to Angela. She felt sick about the way she was living. BM committed suicide because Angela won't leave Gilbert to go off with him, as it was assumed that he asked her to flee with him to Egypt. So now I'm going to be comparing between the relationship of Angela and Gilbert and her relationship with BM as well. Starting off with the relation between Angela and Gilbert, Angela's need for companionship and food for those, since Gilbert doesn't have time to show in her world, she is receptive to someone else's guide. The story superposed by Diary shows development of both characters. Gilbert's statements of certainty become infinite questions. Angela's openness and candor become secret, and this shows that she gained her independence, or her own space. According to Woolf's criticism, men and women enter their marriage on an uneven level, where men are required to know more and women are ornaments, and which creates tension when women strive to learn or express their thoughts. In addition, men and women generally enter marriage not truly knowing each other. Also, marriage means to them only a contract or marriage of convenience. The second thing is the relationship between Angela and BM. Angela's great love was BM, and eventually committed suicide to escape from living a life with Gilbert, as the existence with him was so insufferable that she had to escape. Angela found the lower class people of Whitechapel more worthy of attention and care and respect than Gilbert and their marriage and their home as well. Even though Gilbert was not the most important thing to her, the lower class managed to get the better of him. And what started out as adoration for her husband ends with her terminating her life for another man, who is BM. A man who seemed so beneath him managed to be so alluring that
Angela willingly gave up her life to be with that man because she truly loved him. BM hated the upper class, but he was open-minded enough to fall in love with someone belonging to the upper class people, who was Angela, basically, and he also opened her eyes to the world when he fell in love with her. So now I'm going to be comparing between both short stories, The Legacy and I Stand Here Ironing. It is shown in both stories that the theme of gender roles and domination of men in society appeared. In the story I Stand Here Ironing, Emily's mother had no chance but to leave Emily either in daycares or nurseries, as this was because of the society she was living in. This society shows how not helping it was. The mother couldn't offer support for her child, either physically or financially or mentally. Also, Emily's mom had to remarry a man again to let him support her financially, and it wasn't really put into consideration that whether she loved this man or not. It is also shown that the theme of love is not present in both stories from both female characters, Angela and the mother. As the first husband for the mother in the short story I Stand Here Ironing, he might have not loved her, and that's why he didn't want to have any children from her. So when he knew that she was pregnant, he left her. Also, in the second story, which is The Legacy, the theme of love was only present in the very beginning of the relationship between Angela and Gilbert, as they had a loving and caring relationship, but Gilbert was busy being a politician and he stopped thinking about love, and their relationship started to fall apart gradually. However, the theme of love reappeared again in this story when Angela developed a new love story with BM away from her husband. So, to conclude all what I have said, the main themes of gender inequality, gender roles, and male-dominant society appeared through both stories. It was mentioned in both summaries how exactly these significant themes appeared and how it was reflected. The stories also reflected the analysis of the main characters, with showing the important themes of their personality, as either being strong and having a word, or to be loved and give love. It was also shown how did these women try to stand up for themselves according to the events that occurred in the play, and how they acted up upon the mentioned main themes.